one. I've probably got the most requested video up right now, and I do it just before the new year because I think it's probably the best one for everyone to view. And that video today is my 2025 property predictions. Look, it's not my favorite thing really to do because I don't like predicting over the short term. Everyone knows what my long-term forecasts are, but I'm going to get into it anyway. And it's simply because I think everyone does want to know what I think, but I'm going to also give everyone the long-term view whilst I do this. So a couple of things we're going to get in today. First of all, just the year that's occurred shortly. Second of all, how to position yourself for the future. And then finally, my 2025 property predictions. Look, in the year that occurred, I'm just going to get into some of the main cities I like buying in. So here's just a chart of what they've all done. And I've basically, what I've done here really is just to pull it off CoreLogic RP data. And I've just basically done the aggregated minimum, average and maximum sort of growth levels for each city. So you'll clearly see here that Perth is by far the winner, averaging close to around 25% for the city, which is just incredible. That's basically a once-in-a-generation boom. Then followed by basically Brisbane. Look, if for people that like Adelaide too, Adelaide did a little bit better than Brisbane as well. Then you've got obviously the other sort of East Coast and Southern cities doing not too badly in saying that. So you've got Newcastle, Central Coast, Wollongong, then Sydney with a little bit less growth. Melbourne did pull back a little bit, somewhere between about 2 to about 3% in most data I found. And then Geelong, look, it's basically flat, but you can argue it pulled back about 0.5 to 1% over the year as well. But that's basically what happened in all the cities. So look, the reason for that really though was it was underlined by a few things. So first of all, we obviously had higher interest rates, so that dominated most of the market and most of what kind of did go on. Also, we should consider as well the stages of the market cycle. So obviously Perth and Brisbane are still in their growth phase, whereas Sydney and Melbourne are definitely were in their stabilisation phase, and I'd argue they were in their stabilisation phase apart from obviously that COVID boom because they've had a very good run up. Another thing was obviously the incredibly bad housing crisis we had. So look, I don't know, and no one should argue with me on this, but the states that probably did the worst out of all of them had the worst housing crisis out of all of them. So, you know, if you look at the undersupply in Brisbane and Perth, it's just insane. Furthermore to that, we obviously have a booming mining sector. So resources are doing very well. So obviously Perth does very well and Brisbane does very well on the back of that too, or should I say WA and Queensland, because they do have quite a large component of their economy based on resources. And then finally, it's just a fight to affordability. So look, they call it the Great Australian Migration, and that's obviously people from the southern states, so predominantly Melbourne and Sydney, that tend to move to these other states. So it's, mind you, a lot of people think this is a new trend. It's not. It's happened for a good 10, 15, 20 years now. So it's just become more predominant because obviously the prices in these southern states are just incredible now. Look, the top performers nationally really, they're not areas I actually like to buy, funny enough, predominantly, but these are really the top performers. So you've got North Queensland, so that's Townsville, Cairns, Mackay, etc. So you can include Gladstone, you can include other sort of surrounding areas as well. If you want to include somewhere like Bowen, you can. So that actually did even in some ways outperform a lot of parts of Perth as well. You've obviously got Perth, Adelaide, as I've mentioned, and Brisbane too. Then also you've got, look, obviously just south of there, you've got the Bunbury sort of Busselton region. That did very well as well. When I say these are the top performers, I would literally only buy in a couple suburbs of Perth and a couple suburbs of Brisbane, and that's it. So don't be fooled, people. These are not entirely areas I would buy in, but these are the top performers in 2024. Look, a key part of this, and I think a lot of people tend to forget it, is you need to position yourself longer term. So here's just an example of in basically your 25-year Aussie home loans report, and this is before COVID. I love it because you don't have a dead cat bounce, you don't have a single once in a generation boom, you don't have a 0.1% interest rate. You have dropping rates, but you do go through the dot-com bubble, you go through GFC, and you go through obviously everything else in between that period over 25 years. And you'll just see here alone, if you look at far north Queensland, and this is basically your Cairns sort of Tablelands Mareeba region, you'll see here a lot of the prices in 1993 compared to a lot of the suburbs, even in Melbourne in 1993, are actually not that different, especially the ones that I'd say in outer east and inner west of Melbourne. You could actually even argue that far north are actually more expensive in some ways. But look at what they're priced at now. Like, I mean, it's like $500,000 difference or more. In a lot of circumstances, it's even more just over that time. Imagine how upset you'd be if you bought in far north Queensland and you could have bought in Melbourne for the same price. Let's say even you love living in far north Queensland. Look, I love fishing. I'd love to live somewhere like that if I didn't have work and everything going, all the business connections and everything I have down here. But at the end of the day, if you're buying to make money or buying for work, you need to live somewhere that's going to do well long term. And far north Queensland is just not an area. And the reason I bring this up is because these areas in far north Queensland have done exceptionally well this year. And they probably will next year as well, mind you. But what's going to happen then is they're going to go to sleep for another 10 to 15 years. Whereas you get places like Melbourne and Sydney longer term that will slowly pick up on average somewhere between probably, 4 and 15% when they're in the growth cycle. They won't do it for 2 years. They'll do it for like 4 or 5 in a row. Then they'll stabilise or max go down somewhere between 1 and 5% on the max. Or look, if it's a big one, maybe 10, but they'll bounce straight back up after that. North Queensland will not do that. It'll go stable for, years on end, and you'll get next to no growth, high vacancy rates, flood issues, everything like that. So focus on long-term reasons for one of the reasons of that. Now, another thing I just want to tell people is, look, I did an episode on this in the past, but just don't get caught up in the hotspot hype. And the reason I say hotspot is I absolutely hate this word. It just it should not exist in property investing or property buying at all. Like, a hotspot is a hotspot for a year or two, then it's a not spot for the next 10 years. So don't get caught up in that. Here's an example, and I'm not even picking the worst suburb of Townsville, and then I'm picking a decent suburb of Melbourne, not the best, but a pretty good suburb in Melbourne, one I do buy in. So the suburb I compare is Heatley in Townsville and Footscray in Melbourne. So to give you an idea, some people even think Footscray is a shithole. I like Footscray. I think it's gentrified quite a lot and continuing to increase on the gentrification level and income level especially. And then Heatley as well is a suburb that actually neighbours some of Townsville's better suburbs. So I'm not picking the worst suburb at all. But you'll see here in the early 90s that you could even argue that literally Heatley was more expensive than Footscray. Heatley now is like 420,000 or something like that. Footscray is like 950. Do you really think the person who bought in Heatley would be happy compared to the person that bought in Footscray if they were investing, or even if you're rent vesting, for example? You'd be so upset if you did this. Like, it is such a bad area to buy. I cannot emphasize how bad of an area this is to buy, but people still follow this hotspot nonsense. So really, just don't do that. Just really consider your long-term sort of, goals and where you're going to be longer term, because $500,000 or more at the end of the day changes someone's life. Like, you can't save that amount of money in that amount of years. Like, it's so much easier to get the asset to do the heavy lifting for you. But anyway, another thing that I think people overlook is just your life situation. So I've just written down a few key things here, and I'll just go briefly through them. So first of all, focus on whether your goals are long-term or short-term. So someone who's 25 with their whole life and let's say 5 to 7 market cycles ahead before they retire should buy differently to someone who is literally going to retire in 5 years. You might buy a little bit more cash flow focused if you're going to retire in 5 years. If you're buying long-term, you should focus on mainly capital growth. It's a predominant thing you should. Another thing, your risk profile. And two things that I'd say that encapsulates. First of all, what obviously your ability to take on risk is. So your risk appetite, that is. So how much money you're willing to put up front. And then the second thing is your risk management. So it's how much money you're willing, or should I say, risk you're willing to continue to hold over the long term. Consider that. Your workplace and lifestyle. Not everyone has the ability to just invest willy-nilly or, buy anywhere or interstate or anything like that. Some people are limited to where they can buy. And I understand that. Look, if you have to live and buy a house to live and you have no choice, you might have a young family and maybe an older parent that lives with you, and you just need somewhere to live in, and you have a complicated situation where you can't get rentals. I understand that. And you might also have to live. You might have a job that you can fly in, fly out to. You might have to be close to work, and you have kids in a private school or something nearby. I understand that. So consider that as well. Family's another thing. Like, again, I know I said older parent. You might have care or a loved one who might be ill, and you might need to live in an area too. So look, I completely understand that. You need to consider that as well. And then finally as well, what are you? So I wrote developer versus investor. You could probably write versus home buyer here as well. A developer will buy differently to a buy and hold investor. A developer simply is thinking whether a site will make money immediately when I do a development on it. That's all that really matters. Does it make money, yes or no? A longer term buy and hold investor needs to think of the long term impact of that. A developer is very short term focused. High risk, high return. But obviously, your long-term investor takes a lot less risk, but still gets a very good return in the long term. So, look, just consider those things as well. And yeah, like let's just make sure that we are fully, understanding of where our life is at, because it does play a large part. So just consider that. Let's get into what 2025 will be shaped by. There's a couple of things here: lower inflation, strong immigration, higher unemployment rates, likely rate cuts, affordability, and rising wealth inequality. So look, let's start with my home city and my favourite city in the world. Sorry, I'm a biased Sydney sider, but it's Sydney. So for each of these, all I'm going to do is I'm going to get into some pros and cons, and then basically go into what my actual prediction for the city will be. So Sydney, the pros of Sydney is going to be lower interest rates. Definitely, it affects the market a lot. Higher equity value, strong business investment, landlocked land supply, and strong immigration. A bit of the cons are affordability, the stage of the market cycle, high unemployment rates, and restrictive lending policy. And that's basically, most of those are uncontrollable as to where they are. So really, what's going to happen? Look, in Sydney, the market will level out, and it might likely increase with rate cuts. Something to consider as well for people is a lot of the affluent suburbs may not correlate to the whole market. Now, the reason for this is predominantly these affluent suburbs are bought in cash. So as to the surprise of a lot of people, most of your suburbs, like 4 million and above, are predominantly cash buyers. And so they don't correlate to what the market is, because these people do not need any lending. The market doesn't affect them as much as other people. So look, in saying that, look, Sydney, I think longer term is one of the best buys in the country. But next year, I don't think it'll grow actually that much. My prediction is it'll probably grow somewhere between on the market average of 1% to 4%. I know, look, it's my favorite city, and I'd like to be, unbiased. So I genuinely think that's what it'll do. Mind you, in saying that, it is still probably, in terms of cities, the second best buy longer term after Melbourne, which is the city I'm going to get into next. So look, Melbourne, I'll say, has a few things here. So the pros of Melbourne, again, are likely interest rate cuts. Again, it does affect Melbourne quite a bit. Affordability is actually becoming one of the things that are actually the pros of Melbourne, surprisingly, and it's because the income of Melbourne is actually quite good, but obviously we've got some quite bad things going on there. Another pro is obviously strong immigration levels, very strong equity value, especially because we haven't had much growth there or buying activity, but really we have a lot, like a very high owner occupier percentage at the moment, and we also have an increasing one going on with a lot of investors selling. A bit of the cons are the economy, the stage of the market cycle, higher unemployment rate, poor government policy, and also state debt. So they don't sound great, mind you, but mind you, 4 of the 5 there, so the economy, higher unemployment rate, poor government policy, and state debt, those can all be fixed very quickly with a few better policies. Very quickly. So just consider that in Melbourne. What I think will really happen though, look, the market is going to come off its bottom. It's not going to continue to go, should I say, lull or go down. I think it is going to come off its bottom. This will mainly be driven through population growth, especially through immigration. I'm telling you right now, the affluent suburbs will begin this basically coming off the bottom. So you're going to see your typical areas where most of the better income demographics are that will come off. So those are areas basically like your Yarra, your Stonington, your Manningham, your Maribyrnong and Hobson's Bay predominantly. Those areas, especially the ones with better income demographics, will start this trend. Look, my prediction actually surprisingly to a lot of people is you'll get somewhere between 1 and 5% in the total growth of Melbourne, but you're going to find some of your suburbs that start this trend will do better for sure. Now, this is actually longer term my number one pick to buy over 10 plus years, because it is literally at probably one of the best stages at the moment of the cycle to buy in. So it's not going to have my highest growth, should I say, forecast, but it is my favourite place to buy in all of Australia in terms of the way I buy property, because it's at the best possible time of the cycle, and I love the city to buy in. Let's get into Brisbane. Look, Brisbane's going to be, the pros of Brisbane is it's going to be, obviously rate cuts are going to become a thing, and it's simply because Brisbane's become quite expensive. So that wasn't a thing before COVID, but it is now. Domestic immigration is going to be a big thing too. That great southern migration is not going anywhere. That's going to continue for year after year after year. A good thing as well, actually, is a business investment. You'll find also, like, business investment was actually, surprising, it wasn't actually too bad, especially post-COVID, even under a Labor government, but the Liberals will actually increase that as well, and they'll actually incentivise it a little bit more. I'm not trying to make this political, but that's what they're going to do. The undersupply is just ridiculous in the city as well. And you're going to also get change in government policy. It's actually going to be more pro-investment. So you'll see that actually be good things actually in the Brisbane market. The cons are it's obviously later in the growth cycle. That's one thing. Another thing is it's actually becoming unaffordable for most of the resident population. And again, for people that don't know Brisbane well, there are areas that you should look at and areas that you shouldn't. You're also going to get higher unemployment rates, and that's just going to be a thing of the economy. So just consider that as well. What do I really think will happen in Brisbane though? Look, it will slow down along with most of the country. Look, it's still really boomed over 2024, but that's going to slow down. Although the suburbs with the strongest demographics will perform the best, particularly the inner north and inner east of Brisbane. So look, if people watch my previous episodes, these are your older sort of money areas and the areas with the most sort of the best infrastructure, the best schools, the best, lifestyle areas, the best family suburbs. This is where people want to live. So these areas will perform better than the market. But I think Brisbane will do somewhere between 6 and 10%. So it's not going to do 10 to 15 like it did this year, but it will slow down. It'll do 6 to 10% in my opinion. Again, if you're buying there, give me a shout, because if you don't know where to buy in the inner north and inner east, and I don't even mean the suburbs, because I do tell people these suburbs to buy, and I mean you need to know the exact street and the exact property to buy in there. But Brisbane will do between 6 and 10% growth. Look, really still a fairly good area to buy, so just consider that as well. Perth, look, insane what has gone on in Perth. Like what has been going on in the year of 2024 is something to behold, because like 25% plus growth is insane. But anyway, the pros of Perth going into 2025 as well. Booming state economy and resource industry. That is not going anywhere in 2025. You got probably the lowest state debt you've got in terms of the whole country. And I'd say also along with that, the best economy. You got domestic immigration that is going nowhere still. People are moving there, the young people. I know friends that have actually even moved out that way too. Affordability is another one that might slowly tickle over to the becoming unaffordable resident population by 2025 like Brisbane, but for the moment it's still quite affordable. Lifestyle is another thing, like really good lifestyle in Perth doesn't take you too long to get from A to B. Unless you live far south and you need to get to Joondalup for work, it's not too bad. Like, mind you, some Perth residents, and I have friends and family over there too, might say that's not true, but if you've sat in Sydney or Melbourne traffic over either the Westgate Bridge or the Harbour Bridge, you have nothing to complain about, Perth people. That's all I'm going to say. Low unemployment too. So Perth has basically the best, or should I say the lowest unemployment rate up there in the country. So that's great, especially for a city like Perth. Cons, again, I'll say it's slowly becoming unaffordable for the resident population. It's not quite as bad as Brisbane, but it will slowly become that. And the other one, it's further into its market cycle. In saying that though, look, Perth at the moment, I would say it's white hot. So what's going to happen here is it's going to go from white hot to red hot to hot in the space of 12 months. Mind you, just to go to hot alone, hot is still doing literally like around 1% a month or so. It's doing something like that. So Perth's still doing that despite how, it doesn't really matter how long this takes, but I think it'll be within the space of 12 months. Hot is still very good growth. Look, another thing just to consider here is the suburbs really closer to the main CBD are going to do better than the suburbs sort of outside those employment areas. So I mean the CBD and the employment areas, the suburbs that are near there. So I mean particularly between Osborne Park and Joondalup and around the CBD too, they're going to do better than your sort of outer suburbs. That's going to happen because they haven't actually grown quite as much as the ones that are kind of quite out of town. But historically speaking, they're actually some of the better performers, and they will catch up and close out the cycle better. But Perth's going to do somewhere between 11 and 16% in my opinion, and people are going to think that's still ridiculous. I still don't mind buying in some suburbs of Perth, but be a bit careful because it's not my favourite pick longer term. It's simply because it's a long way into its growth cycle now, and it will slowly start to level out. But we've got, a whole nother boom year ahead in my opinion. I can't see it doing anywhere less than 10% growth, really. I was thinking about putting 10, but then I'm 6% between my growth predictions, quite a lot, so I put 11 to 16. But that's where I think it's going to land in 2025. I think it's going to do quite well, much to the happiness of a lot of people that have bought there and a lot of people that own there as well, so well done to all those people. Let's get into Newcastle. So, look, Newcastle's one of my favourite regional locations to buy, and it's simply because it's got an insanely good economy for somewhere that's not a capital city. It's insanely good. So, look, a couple of the pros for Newcastle is obviously we've got likely rate cuts. It is slowly becoming a little bit affected by the interest rates simply because the prices are quite expensive now. Look, affordability, though, is a very good thing. Again, I said it does have quite a good economy and quite good income there. So, affordability is actually quite good, especially in the suburbs with high income demographics. Business investment is incredible in Newcastle. You've got, some government, some private, some even tech firms moving in, some even biomed firms going into there. So that's a good thing. Again, like I said, strong income levels and industry is another. Lifestyle is another one. In the right suburbs, you're 10 minutes from the CBD, 10 minutes from the beach, walkable distance to parks, walkable distance to schools, walkable distance to, or even commutable distances to work and everything like that too. And job opportunities per resident is incredible. You've actually got very, very, very good, should I say, high paying jobs per resident compared to everywhere else in the country. Up there with Sydney and Melbourne. So those are pros. Cons, the stage of the market cycle. Newcastle, in my opinion, is sort of more in the stabilisation phase of the market cycle, is kind of slowly picking up. Some parts are unaffordable for the resident population and definitely becoming that. And the other thing is you do have moderate unemployment rates moving into a bit more of a, balanced economy rather than a booming economy. Despite all of that, look, over the long term, I think markets will begin its slightly softened trend, long-term trend. So, look, Newcastle isn't known longer term, for doing, a 10% year or 20% year or something like that. It's known for doing usually somewhere between, 3 and about 12%. It's sort of a softened growth trend. So I think you're going to come off the low. It's going to start to probably pick up a little bit, especially with these rate cuts coming in. Suburbs that are also affordable and closest CBD with the right demographics are going to actually do better than probably the lower end of this trend. So, look, my prediction for Newcastle is that it'll do somewhere between 3 and 7% growth over the long term. But although for people with under $1 million budgets that don't want to buy in Victoria, it is my favourite location to buy in basically all of New South Wales and probably the whole country, really, outside of if you don't want to buy in Victoria, because you're still picking up places below $1 million that will do very well longer term. So that's Newcastle. If anyone has any questions, just reach out below. All the links are available there. Geelong. Now, look, Geelong, for everyone that doesn't know, it is actually my favourite location and the favourite cheapest location to buy in the whole country. And that is because You have very good fundamentals there, but you can still pick up properties, around that $500,000 mark, just below and above as well. You can pick up suburbs that have done 9% long-term, around 650,000. So it's just incredible. 650 to 700, should I say, because you do need to do a bit of work to those, but you can still pick them up. But the pros of Geelong is likely rate cuts. Look, it's not because it's affordable, it's not dominated by that, but it does still affect this market 100%, because you've got a lot of Melbourne buyers that go out and buy there as well. Affordability, as I discussed, it's incredibly affordable, even for the resident population. So that's a pretty good thing in a city. Job opportunities are very good. You've got transport, like government industry, like transport going out there, and some other industries as well. Government-backed industries, you've got actually some little firms popping up too, which is really good too. So that's helping the economy. Lifestyle's another thing. You're close to the Surf Coast Peninsula. You're close to, you're obviously on, I'd say, the outskirts of Bellarine. So really nice areas, like good farmlands. There's some wineries. If you like the beach, it's pretty nice down there. Pretty open space. If you like fishing, it's really good for that too. Pretty good like family life for kids as well. Not a lot of areas there, I'd say, quite safe too. So it's quite nice. You got increasing regional GDP as well. So for those that don't know, have a look at KPMG Geelong Economic Blueprint. You can search it up on Google. Between 2016 and 2021, the GDP grew at 3.7%. That's more than double the national GDP. So that's a really good thing. Look, the cons of Geelong, again, are similar to Melbourne. One's the state debt. Two's the poor government policy. And three's the economy. And when I say economy, I mean the state economy. That's affecting Geelong a lot. But again, as I said to everyone, that can change very quickly with policy. Like very, very quickly, this can change with policy. So don't let it scare you off. Although, look, my prediction of Geelong is probably to the surprise of a lot of people. The market's going to come off its bottom, and I actually think the recovery is already underway. So I buy in Geelong quite a lot. And I've already seen properties go well above their price guide. 4 and 5% above their price guide, with people bidding against each other. And that's the right properties. It's definitely selling now, okay? Another thing is, look, the cheaper suburbs will increase in demand and the premium suburbs will follow. So it'll do the opposite of what's happening in Melbourne. What Geelong's actually being driven by here is it's actually the affordability. It's not like Melbourne where it's your international money coming, because Geelong's not really an international city as just yet. It probably might take 15 to 20 years for that to happen. But your more affordable suburbs are starting to pick up. So my prediction really is Geelong's going to do somewhere between 3 and 7% growth. And you're going to get some of your cheaper suburbs actually pick up a little bit more than that, I think, in the general market. But that's what I think is going to happen with Geelong. But for everyone's sort of long-term knowledge, I think this is the best possible place long-term you can buy at around that $500,000 or maybe even a touch more, touch under. Especially if you want great long-term growth and you have around 700K, this is the best possible place you can buy for sure. You can get suburbs that do 8 or 9% long-term. So consider Geelong. It is my favourite place. I regularly am down there. I regularly buy there. So reach out if you are interested. Let's go into the Central Coast. Now, it's not an area I do like buying in some parts of the Central Coast, but it's not my favourite area. But there is probably, about 8 or 9 suburbs, maybe 7, 8 or 9 suburbs that I do look at here. For the moment, there is some good suburbs. And look, some people do like buying here and reach out to me about it. And I do guide them to the right areas and do buy for them in the right areas. So, look, the pros of the Central Coast at the moment is likely rate cuts and affordability. Look, I say affordability, and a lot of the coasties, so that's what people on the Central Coast call themselves, might have an issue with this, but a lot of people that work in Sydney or from Sydney or Newcastle actually do buy here. So the income for those buyers actually is still quite affordable. And they are quite affected by rate cuts as well. So if that does happen, it will help the economy and the buying there quite a lot. The proximity to Sydney and Newcastle is just a given. Again, it's an hour from either of them, which is really good. So and there's quite a good transport system too. So people who do actually work in both do even catch public transport. In a lot of the cases, just drive there. Your infrastructure and facilities are getting a lot better. So particularly some precincts, particularly between Wyong, Tuggerah and the entrance, and between Gosford and Terrigal, is becoming quite good. and your lifestyle is another one. So great lifestyle there, great beaches, great family lifestyle, open space, everything like that is all really good in the Central Coast. Some cons of it, again, is the stage of the market cycle it's in. Land supply spread is also another one. So parts of the Central Coast do have quite a large land supply. So especially if you go pretty far west of Lake Haven and out past Wollongong, there's quite a lot of land there. So that will affect your growth. And there is quite a few being subdivided and things going through council and the government at the moment. So consider that as well. The transport orientated plan will affect that too in certain corridors. The other things you want to just consider are higher unemployment rates and demographics. When I know I've got affordability and demographics on a pros and cons, but the reason it's there is because certain areas of the Central Coast do have quite low demographics and not much has kind of changed around there yet. It will, but you need to buy in the areas that have the right demographics and a bit better employment. So you really need to know where you're buying in the Central Coast because it's so spread out. Though look, what's going to happen there is it will continue a very growth trend, and it's because of the demand from your more affluent residents and especially Sydney-siders, and I could probably add a few people from Newcastle too. But set suburbs in the growth pockets will outperform the market, especially large land supply suburbs as well. Look, and really what my prediction for the Central Coast is it'll probably grow somewhere between 2 and 6% over 2025, and it's simply because it's in sort of more stabilisation phase. It's picking up a little bit, but it's still in its kind of stabilisation phase. Rate cuts will help it a little bit, not a lot. So that's probably what's going to happen in my opinion. For those that want to obviously buy in a better long-term growth areas, Central Coast is a great area. If you love the beach and you don't want to live somewhere too busy, Central Coast is probably, if you don't want to buy in Victoria as well, probably one of your best spots to buy long-term in Australia. So consider that and reach out to me if you have that idea. Wollongong. Look, Wollongong, I went to uni down there. It's one of my favourite regional areas in the whole country. I love Wollongong. It's beautiful. The beaches are amazing. The surf's awesome. I can't talk enough about Wollongong. I love the area. It's somewhere I'll forever be in my heart. I love the area. One of the most beautiful coastlines in the world. I'd say it's probably as nice, if not nicer, than the Great Ocean Road. But not many people even know where to go and where to look. But sorry for people down there. I might have spoiled a little bit of that for some people. But anyway, the pros of the Wollongong market is, again, likely rate cuts. It is affected by interest rates because of the amount of Sydney-siders that buy down there, and also the prices. Lifestyle, you cannot beat the lifestyle, particularly in the north and the sort of eastern part of Wollongong. It's incredible. You're right by the beach, and it's got that kind of old school surf coast vibe down there. It's incredible. Even going out, it's kind of that old school sort of surf town, very towny vibe. You don't really get that in many places of the country anymore, but that's Wollongong. Obviously, it's proximity to Sydney and increasing infrastructure and facilities. Just go down Crown Street and drive towards North Beach. Just look at how many cranes are in the sky. Drive around Thirroul, look at all the coffee shops and anything like that. Even around Corrimal and Taraji, Fairy Meadow, you'll see how much is going on there. The facilities are incredible. The train line's very good as well. A lot of people start, actually work in the city they'll have a hybrid work. They might work in the city 2 and 3 or 3 and 2. So a lot of people are happy to do that now. And there's landlocked land supply. So for people that don't know Wollongong, you've got the Illawarra Escarpment that runs up. So it's basically a very high, it's not quite a mountain, but I'd call it extremely high hill/cliff face kind of, and anywhere basically north of kind of Mount Ousley, Fairy Meadow is basically completely surrounded by the escarpment, or should I say overshadowed. So there's no more land to build there. So the land supply is completely landlocked and there's no more land to build on. So it's complete, the land's all gone. They ran out of land up there. So that's something to consider. The cons are, again, alike to a lot of the eastern and southern states, the stage of the market cycle. Affordability is also something that's happening. The good suburbs are quite unaffordable now for the resident population. You do have a higher unemployment rate. Look, it doesn't have as good of an employment rate as Sydney or Newcastle. It's developing, but it's not quite there yet. And another con is, look, this isn't all parts, but some areas of Wollongong are of a quite lower demographic, so it's not the best area to buy because of that in some areas. But just make sure you're buying in the areas with the right demographics. Look, Wollongong, in my opinion, it's going to in 2025 come off its bottom of its sort of market cycle. Though it will continue to be soft due to just simply pricing affordability and the stage of the cycle. Now, because Sydney's going to probably start to pick up before Wollongong will pick up, it will take longer for the Sydney siders to buy in the areas that historically have done as well. So that's the reason why it'll be a little bit softer, and it's also in the stabilisation phase of the cycle. The other thing as well is you'll start to see, because of the transport orientated planning around the CBD, there'll be a massive increase in high-rise unit blocks, and that'll increase supply. The cheaper suburbs, though, will in the north, so I mean the cheaper suburbs that are above the CBD, north of the CBD, will actually outperform, because some of them are actually still affordable that residents can afford, and Sydney siders can afford too. Now, Sydney siders will be soft up, but there still will be some, but they won't. It's not the ones who predominantly buy your $2 and $3 million suburbs here, right? It's the ones that buy the $1 to $1.2, $1.3 million that will do probably a little bit better. In saying that, look, I think Wollongong in the whole will do probably 1 to 5%, but certain suburbs will probably do a little bit better than that. So just consider that, or even just do the higher end of that average, should I say. But really consider where you're buying in Wollongong. If you don't know it, please reach out. All my details are below. But just want to thank everyone for watching this video. We're coming towards the end of it. If you're really looking to get in the market and look, you don't know what you're doing, just reach out below, book a private consult, or just give me a call or email. All the contact details are below. And check out Premier Properties. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but these are properties with a total return that is 30-year capital growth plus gross rental yield, immediate upfront rental yield of 13% and above. Now, most people struggle to get 10% here, and these will have the highest IRR, internal rate of return, because as I've said to people over the long term, what you want is a high capital growth plus a decent rental yield, because rent slides down over the long term. So your IRR will stay higher if you have a higher percentage of capital growth. So it is very important. But anyway, just again, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope it's been a great episode, and Happy New Year for everyone watching. I hope you have a great 2025 ahead and a very prosperous one with family and friends. Cheers, everyone.